Can you believe we've already made it to the last module for the course? Our last module covers human resources. So we start by talking about Chapter 9 and human resource management, and then we move into Chapter 16, which is all about managing the store. So we're going to start big and then narrow down. We talked about this semester how retailers manage a lot of assets, but some of the most important assets that retailers manage are location, their merchandise, their channels, their employees, and their customer. So we're going to focus in on the employees. And as you remember, human resources management is one way that a retailer can build a sustainable competitive advantage. So let's dive right in. And let's talk about what HR is. Human resource management is the task is really responsible for aligning the capabilities and behaviors of employees with the overall goals of the retailer. So we're going to look at performance measures in HR. We're going to talk about a few challenges that HR professionals face. We're going to dive into the organizational structure of retail, and we're going to talk about retaining talent, so retaining our employees at our establishments. And the very first thing we're going to do is talk about our human resource management objectives and performance measures. If you go back to Chapter 6, at the very end of the chapter, we started discussing performance measures. And I mentioned in that chapter that we would be looking at some of these different performance measures throughout the rest of the semester. And so here we are. A lot of those measures related to HR. And three specific measures that we're going to talk about are employee productivity, employee turnover, and employee engagement. Retailers have both short and long-term measures that they look at. So let's talk about our short-term HR performance measure, which is increasing our employee productivity. So what we're looking at with employee productivity is the sales generated per employee. And so we actually have an equation that measures that for us. And what we do is we look at our net sales over the number of full-time employees that we have, and we come up with our employee productivity number. Now you'll notice that in the denominator we look at the number of full-time employees. Now a full-time employee is someone who works 40 hours for the sake of our math, and so a lot of times retailers will have part-time employees as well, and so you'll kind of add up your part-time employees and get to your number of full-time employees. So we do look at the number of full-time employees for this measurement. Now the national retail average for employee productivity is about $206,000, and that's an annual number. So annually, each employee in a retail establishment is bringing in around $206,000, and so that's a general national average that retailers can use for comparison purposes. But it's also important to look at the size of the retailer, the merchandise the retailer is selling, how when you start breaking it into part-time employees, how much each employee actually is working. So there's a lot of other factors that kind of go into the individual employee productivity number, but generally it's our net sales over our number of employees. For long-term, we want to increase our employee satisfaction. This is one of our long-term objectives. And so our measure for that is employee turnover. And employee turnover measures the numbers of employees who voluntarily leave their job. This is an important thing to measure because there's a lot of inputs used to train those employees, and so we spend a lot of money training our employees, and we want to keep them around. So we look at our number of employees who leave each year, and again, this is voluntarily. This isn't anyone who gets fired or let go. This is voluntary termination. And we take that over the number of positions we have at our retail establishment to get this employee turnover number. So the national average for employee turnover for all jobs is 3.3%. So 3.3% of employees are leaving annually. In retail, that number is higher. It's closer to 5% in the retail sector, 5% employee turnover. And in quick service restaurants, that number continues to increase. So it's very critical for retailers to try to manage this turnover, to try to keep their best employees for as long as possible. Another long-term objective of human resource management is to increase employee engagement. And this is the emotional commitment by an employee to the organization. This can't be measured by a formula, so we don't have a formula to measure employee engagement like we do turnover and productivity. But satisfied employees, they expend extra effort for the retailer, so they're motivated to support the retailer. They help improve customer satisfaction, and they help us grow our sales. So by keeping our employees engaged, we're really helping all aspects of the business. Now, a couple issues with this HRM objective is that companies tend to view employees as a cost and not an investment. And it's critical that retailers begin to look at their employees as an investment and not just an expense line on the income statement. When you minimize labor costs, you cut hours and therefore pay, and that reduces your customer service levels, and so it creates some angry employees. So this kind of goes into that investment in your employees. How much are you paying your employees? And we're not just going to talk about monetary forms of payment in this module, but we're going to talk about different types of rewards and how to invest in your employees to make sure that they are loyal to you, motivated to support you, which will lead to increased customer satisfaction and even grow your sales. Motivated sales associates offer better service and they get more sales for your retail establishment. So those are the overall objectives that we talk about, and the overall and the two performance, really the three performance measures that we look at in HR. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, and we're going to jump quickly through some of these topics in HR, is how to design our organizational structure. This is one of the big strategic issues that HR professionals deal with at their company is organizational structure and how to assign responsibility and how to assign authority for tasks. So retailers and any business have an organizational structure, and this organizational structure does two things. It identifies the activities to be performed by specific employees, and it also determines the lines of authority and responsibility in a firm. So it shows the hierarchy, if you will. And so the most important thing that the organizational structure does is identify the activities to be performed by the specific employees. So if we think about this organizational structure, each box represents a group of tasks or activities or a job description, if you will. And so by putting your name in a box, it's easy for a retailer to determine who is supposed to do which tasks. And that helps guide the retail organization. And so that leads us into our discussion on the tasks that are performed in a retail establishment. So we have this overall organizational structure that helps us determine who's doing what task. Now let's talk about some of the tasks available or some of the tasks that are performed in the retail firm. One of the largest groups of tasks are your strategic management tasks. And these tasks are performed by your top management or your board of directors, your CEO, your CFO, your CMO. They are making some of these decisions. And these charts come from your book, so you'll have a second reference point as to looking at what some of these tasks are. These are the things that happen really before the retail establishment opens and are kind of the ongoing strategic tasks that happen in a retail establishment. So these are the tasks that include developing the retail strategy, identifying the target market, determining the retail format and the retail mix. This is the group who determines at an overarching level what you're going to sell, where you're going to locate, how you're going to sell, and who you're going to target. And those all fall into the strategic management task group. The next group of tasks are administrative tasks. And these are tasks that are performed by corporate managers. And these corporate managers generally have very specialized skill sets to complete some of these tasks. So some of these tasks include your marketing, human resource management, finance, accounting, supply chain, legal issues. So these are your corporate managers. Generally, for a large chain retailer, these people would work in a corporate headquarters or a regional headquarters with the strategic management team, and they're generally doing some of the large overarching strategic planning for some of these administrative functions for a retail business. The next group of tasks that happen in a retail firm, retail establishment, are your merchandise management tasks. Now, these tasks are performed by category managers, buyers, merchandise planners, and sometimes these tasks, this group of people fall under the supervision of the store manager, the individual store, and sometimes this group of tasks falls under a corporate setting in a corporate office. It just depends on the retailer. But these are the people who are actually buying the merchandise. So they are selecting the merchandise, they're negotiating with vendors, they're placing orders. These are the group of people who help control the merchandise. So everything that happens in that merchandise planning process that we talked about in chapters 12 and 13, that's what happens. Those are all merchandise management tasks. These people also price the merchandise. So pricing falls under the merchandise management task category. And then the last set of tasks fall under store management. Now we're going to dive into store management very deeply when we get to chapter 16. But all the tasks that fall in this category are performed by the store manager. And so you'll see a lot of these on here. And a lot of this is what we're going to get into when we get to chapter 16. But the store manager is actually responsible for recruiting, hiring, and training store personnel. Now, generally, your HR management team in a corporate setting is putting together general policies, general job descriptions, but it's up to the store manager to actually hire and train every person who works for him. The store manager is planning your schedules. He's doing the evaluations of the employees. Ultimately, he's responsible for maintaining this, he or she is responsible for maintaining the store facilities. Breaking down those plans that we talked about in chapter 17 and making sure that the retail strategy is implemented through presentation. The store management team is responsible for handling customer complaints and dealing with everything we talked about in our customer service chapter. So there's a lot that happens at the store that the store manager is responsible for. All right, so those are your overall kind of groups of tasks and how the retail organization is set up into strategic management tasks, administrative management tasks, merchandise management tasks, and store management tasks. So let's look at one last kind of thing on this topic when we're talking about organizational structure. Let's look at how a single store retailer would distribute their tasks in an organization. So if you look at kind of the color coding here, this would be a way that tasks are broken out in a single store retailer. So this is a lot of your small local boutiques, locally owned restaurants. This is about 90% of retailers today in a single store operation. So your owner is going to be doing all of your strategic management tasks. The owner might also take on all the other tasks as well and slowly hire one or two people. They're probably going to, the owner manager of the single store retailer is also going to act as the merchandise manager and do the merchandise management. Generally, you'll hire a store manager, but sometimes the owner also acts as the store manager and does the store management tasks. Now, a lot of times an accountant and financial control, those are outsourced for a single store retailer. They will partner with an outside accounting firm to perform those tasks and pay a fee, just because generally the owner manager of a single store retailer does not have the necessary skill set to do that. Kind of an interesting statistic, more than 95% of retail firms have only one store, and about 58% of retail establishments in the United States today have less than 5 employees. 58% of retail establishments, less than 5 employees. So you think about the number of retailers that exist. There are so many retailers. There are millions of retail establishments across the country, and almost 60% of them have less than 5 employees. So that's what a single store retailer organizational structure would generally look like. Now, when you get into the national retail chain organizational structure, it's much more in depth. It's a little bit more complicated, but a CEO is going to be at the top and oversee the entire organization. And then you'll generally have vice presidents and levels of management for each task. So you'll see that you have a senior vice president of merchandising. And under that person, there are multiple levels of people who handle the merchandise management tasks. You'll have a senior vice president of stores, and again, people who manage stores at a lower level. And you'll have a lot of different vice presidents and management levels for some of those administrative tasks, which you see in green on your screen there. So that wraps up our discussion on organizational structure, which is one of the most important strategic tasks that a retail manager, or I'm sorry, a human resource professional is going to manage. We'll move into talking a little bit about how we actually develop our talent, we hire talent, train talent, motivate talent, and keep talent in the next part of this lecture.